Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. In the Mica Miller case, every day new information comes up. And I think that because one of the things, or many of the things that happened in this case, is that the investigation from the very beginning was not thorough enough. And from being an investigator, being a detective sergeant with the NYPD, the fact that there was no autopsy in this case, to me, is absolutely inexcusable. Absolutely inexcusable that there was no autopsy. So now, what are the sheriff from Robeson County? He's going to be calling in the FBI and the state attorney general's office to join the Mica Miller investigation. I mean, it probably should have been done from the very beginning. The FBI's repeatedly been called in to investigate the death of Mica Miller, the wife of a pastor, who local authorities said took her own life last month. Again, Mica was 30 years old. She was found dead in Lumber State River Park in North Carolina on April 27th. She died of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound, according to the Robeson County Sheriff's Office, based on surveillance footage, interviews, physical evidence, and the examination of the North Carolina Medical Examiner's Office. Her family has urged authorities to further investigate her death, alleging she was abused and groomed by her estranged husband, John Paul Miller, who's 44 years old. He's the pastor of the Solid Rock and Market Common Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. He was apparently in Charleston, South Carolina on the night that Mica died, according to the sheriff's office. John Paul Miller's attorney, Russell Long, denied allegations that his client had abused or groomed his wife. They were actually so obvious that the denial is almost laughable. Following the untimely death of Mica Miller, unfounded rumors and false accusations began circulating on social media and in various media outlets, suggesting Pastor Miller's involvement in her demise. This created a buzz, causing local and national media outlets to be proliferating these falsehoods on a mammoth proportion. This is according, of course, to Pastor Miller's attorney, Long, Mr. Long. Our client refutes any report that suggests he ever abused his wife. Like, no, we just see it on video. We actually see it on video. That's how but he denies it. The sheriff's office announced on Monday that it had requested the assistance of the United States Attorney General Office and the FBI in the investigation of Miller's death. The Robeson County Sheriff's Office has been in contact with the United States Attorney's Office and Federal Bureau of Investigation in South Carolina since the early stages of Mica Miller's investigation, the sheriff's office said in a statement. What I'm really concerned with is if they requested help and very early on, then why weren't they advised to have an autopsy done? Why? Why did they not have it? That is what everyone here is asking. It's amateur hour that in a suicide, which is suspicious in itself, and I've said numerous times, manner of death is homicide, suicide, accidental, natural, and undetermined. Those are the 5 manners of death. So this appears to be a suicide, but is there any chance, even a far-fetched chance, that this could be a homicide? Well, we don't have an eyeball witness to the gun going off. We have an ear witness. We have a fisherman who was on the banks, who heard crying and then heard a gunshot. And then he found property belonging to Mica on the shore. And shortly thereafter, her body was recovered. But we have other questions. Where was the spent shell? Was the casing ever recovered? Where was the firearm? Was it in the water? Was it on the shore? Where was the gunshot wound? All of these questions would have been answered with an autopsy. However, someone, and I don't know who it was, someone decided there was no autopsy necessary. I would hate to find out that they actually spoke to the pastor, John Paul Miller, and asked him permission, because you wouldn't need it. But I wouldn't doubt in this background that they may have asked him and he could have denied it. Here's a guy that clearly has been abusing his wife, and you're going to ask him whether or not he shouldn't have been calling any of the shots whatsoever in regards to her, what was done with her body, what was done with her service. All of those things should have been called by her immediate family. So, folks, we're going to go into some of these things and why the FBI was brought in, what they might find, and why this wasn't done. You know, there's an old adage in a criminal investigation: do it right the first time, because you're not going to get a second chance. And let's hope that this second chance will uncover evidence that will help the family of Mica and Mica Miller to get closure in this case. So, folks, hold on to your hats. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael White.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
You know, there was a gentleman on April 27th who was fishing in Lumberton State Park, very close to the area where Mica was. And he heard crying, and then he heard a gunshot wound. Excuse me, heard a gunshot go off, not a wound. He heard a gunshot. And he, at some point, moved towards it because he found Mica's property. And I want to play a little bit of, because this witness, this ear witness, is reluctant. He was very cooperative, but he's sort of being disparaged by the social media, whole nation of social media criticizing this poor guy.
On the death of Mica Miller, the estranged wife of John Paul Miller, former pastor at the Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach. This week, the Robeson County Sheriff's Office, they released a timeline of what happened the day Mica died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound at the Lumber River State Park. Now, tonight, the man who reported hearing Mica crying and the sound of a gunshot at that state park is sharing how his character is now under attack. He says it's destroying his life, and he wants the baseless attacks that he's seeing on social media to stop. He talked with ABC 15's Tanya Brown. She joins us now live from the Robeson County Sheriff's Office in Lumberton.
Andrew, the fisherman says he never thought fully cooperating with the police investigation and telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth would lead to him being unfairly targeted on social media. I met 55-year-old Johnny Jacobs today at an undisclosed location in Robeson County. He didn't want me to show his face because he's concerned for his safety after being bashed and targeted on social media.
It's like putting my life in danger with some of the things that's been said.
Jacobs tells me he'd been fishing for several hours on April 27th at the Lumber River State Park when he heard a faint cry. He says 2 or 3 minutes later, he heard a gunshot.
I said, oh my God, don't tell me, because the crying had stopped. I said, don't tell me something's happened, don't tell me something. I was getting ready to get out of there. Another 3 people came into the lake on a boat, and I plainly asked them, I said, did y'all hear that gunshot? They said yes.
Jacob says he couldn't see anything because of all the trees blocking his view.
This here's the park, of course. This is where I put my boat in at.
He showed me a map on his phone of the Lumber River State Park to better show his location on the river that day.
You see how thick the woods are. That's why I couldn't see nothing. So right along in here is where I found Mica's belongings at.
He says he found Mica's backpack, glasses, and cell phone on the bank and gave them all to deputies on scene. He says he didn't know Mica and has no reason to lie to police. Johnny Jacobs wants the unfair targeting against him to end.
I want this to stop as far as me. I don't want to make this all about me because I'm still thinking about Mica. I'm trying to respect her family, and I got total respect for them, and I am so sorry for what they're going through. I never thought my day would turn out like that.
The Robeson County medical examiner has also been bashed on social media for how he ruled Mica's death as a suicide. Now, the North Carolina State Medical Examiner's Office, I reached out to them today to get information on if an autopsy was done on Mica's body, and I am still waiting to learn that answer. Live in Lumberton, Tanya Brown.
Apparently, the answer to that is no. And that's the part of this whole investigation that is very suspicious. That decision, why was that decision made? Why was there no autopsy in a suicide or attempted suicide or whatever you want to call it? There's many people out there that aren't satisfied that this investigation is telling the correct story. When you have the backdrop of this story being this pastor here, Pastor John Paul Miller, and he's done some extremely egregious things. How do we trust that something nefarious hasn't happened? And I'm not saying, I mean, I think the investigation that was done, I think they're leaving a lot of things out. I think they could satisfy the public much more if they released a lot more of their investigation. But the big part of this that is hurting everyone that's following this case, the family included, is that there was no autopsy. That's horrific in my mind as a homicide investigator. How could there not be an autopsy? And how do we not know whether they in fact recovered the shell casing on the scene? What part of her body was shot? That's never been released. So people, of course, are questioning the investigation. You're not even telling us how it happened. Where was she found? Apparently she was found in the water. How deep was the water? Was she just on the shore in the water? Was there anyone that was, we have this gentleman who was fishing, who is what we would call an ear witness, but he's as close to being an eyewitness as possible. Did he see anyone else in that park? Did anyone else in that park see Mica leave her car and walk toward the riverbank? All of these questions I have. Did they do a canvass of the park? A very important interview in this case, of course, would be the interview of the 911 operator. What were her actions? And we heard some of her actions on the phone. But how quickly did the police get there? How quick was the police response? Because we all know this, and we see this little thumbnail on the screen. Mica Miller was manipulated, abused, and stalked by her husband. That, even though his attorney says there's no evidence, that is a fact. We see it in plain sight. We've watched videos of him abusing her. We watched that one video of him threatening to put out naked photos of her on Facebook. So this attorney is like, it's almost laughable when he says there was no abuse. This thumbnail, Mica Miller went to police multiple times in the months preceding her death. And that's another thing. Why was there no arrest of this guy? Why was he never arrested? That's a huge question I have. This is a huge question we spoke about yesterday. Could there be a civil rights case in this that, based on the inactivity of the police and the no arrest of clearly a violator, that her civil rights were violated because her life wasn't protected from this guy who was clearly stalking her? 12 to 14 police reports, and he's never been arrested? What does that say to everyone? Does that say there's potentially some type of corruption here? I don't know. What is the juice? How is this guy connected? Let's see. Let's play a little bit of Banfield here.
And threats and allegations, all surrounding the tragic death of Mica Miller. The story tonight is not so much about her actual death, but instead it's about the final years of her clearly unhappy life and some very toxic and threatening communications from her estranged husband that are just now being unearthed. And I'm going to read them for you in just a moment. But first, there is some very curious news tonight on the law enforcement front. The Robeson County Sheriff's Department says that it has been in contact with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI. And the sheriff says they've been in contact with those two agencies since the early stages of this investigation. And the sheriff says tonight that the sheriff has requested the assistance of both of those agencies, the U.S. Attorney and the FBI, for a suicide. But here is a very weird little twist. When we, News Nation, reached out to Mica's family for comment, they told us that the FBI informed them that the Bureau was not involved in the investigations. What? Someone got some explaining to do. Now, look, police have already ruled that the wife of the South Carolina pastor died by suicide with a gun that she had purchased herself just hours before her death. But since that tragic event, the details of her relationship with that estranged husband, John Paul Miller, well, those have been oozing out of the woodwork, and they paint a very dark picture. Mica's family says the relationship was, in a word, toxic. And though there's plenty of evidence to support that, John Paul continues to say, at least in public, that Mica was the love of his life. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com.
So again, they're bringing in the FBI now. Is it too late? I mean, what I'm going to say is I think with the FBI, and apparently it's not the state attorney general's office, they requested the U.S. attorney general's office to get involved in this case. What they're going to start to do, well, they've been brought in apparently by the sheriff, Robeson County Sheriff, to help with the death investigation. But usually what the FBI starts doing and the U.S. attorney starts to do, they start looking at peripheral things like this man here and his church. They start looking at the finances of that church. They start looking at his activities. How about looking at the fact that this poor woman, Mica Miller, made 12 reports or 14 reports against this guy, and he was never arrested. But bringing in the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI, okay, let's cross our T's and dot our I's with the death investigation. However, a huge problem with that, again, is that there is no autopsy and the body's been cremated. So they can't undo the mistake that was done. They can't do toxicology because they don't have the body anymore. I would love to know whose decision this was. And someone in the chat asked me, who makes the decision on an autopsy? That decision is in the purview of the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, not the police. The police can request an autopsy, but whether an autopsy is actually done is in the purview of the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. So this would be Robeson County's Chief Medical Examiner because the death occurred inside that park in North Carolina. So that's the question. And apparently, the medical examiner responded to the scene, responded to that lake. So why, again, and I sound like a broken record, why was there no autopsy? And whose decision was it not to do one?
The death of the wife of a South Carolina pastor. She was found dead in an apparent suicide in April, but now federal authorities are assisting. Eva Pilgrim has the story. Good morning, Eva.
Good morning, George. Mica Miller's friends and families have said since she died that they think there's something more to this story, and they've been pushing for answers, begging for investigators to keep looking. This morning, the investigation taking a turn. This morning, an unexpected twist in the death of a South Carolina pastor's wife. The sheriff announcing the FBI and U.S. attorney are helping in the Mica Miller investigation. The 30-year-old calling 911 moments before she was found dead at a state park in North Carolina on April 27th, about an hour north of where she lived in Myrtle Beach. Her death had been ruled a suicide.
There's got to be some accountability here.
Mica's death coming just days after she told a police officer she was scared for her life, finding a GPS tracker on her car and a razor blade in her tire. She and her husband, John Paul Miller, were in the process of separating. He was a pastor at a local church. He has since been released from his duties, but previously spoke at a memorial service about his wife.
Been down with the body about 4 times this week, and each time it still didn't hit me. I thought she was going to wake up. I even tried to raise her from the dead.
And now new images released.
Every time I hear him say that, I want to say this guy needs to be committed to a mental institution, and he's putting his ex-wife in a mental hospital. He even tried to raise her from the dead. You heard him say that clear as day. Is this guy kidding me?
Released from authorities show Mica the day of her death, leaving her house, buying a gun, stopping at a gas station near the park, and then making that 911 call.
Are you able to trace the location of my phone?
Authorities releasing no other information about the investigation at this time. Some friends and family left with questions, refusing to believe Mica took her own life.
We were talking about her coming to church Sunday, just life stuff, just her moving forward.
Mica, posting shortly before her death, shared this with anyone struggling with leaving a dangerous situation.
God hates divorce because it hurts people. But does abuse hurt people? How do you think God feels about that?
And this was her last Facebook post. When terrible, terrible, terrible things happen to you, y'all know what I'm talking about. RPF, rest in peace face. Now, investigators say they actually requested assistance from the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office early into this investigation based on the information gathered and for jurisdiction reasons, Robin.
I know.
So, some of the questions you guys are coming out of the chat. Yeah, I have some questions too. Well, let's go to Miriam Montalvo. The pastor said he was with her body for 4 times, so the body was released to him. Like, where was the body? In the coroner's, I imagine. He was there all that time with the body. I'm so confused. Miriam Montalvo, usually when the medical examiner releases the body, it's released to a funeral home. And that's potentially, and because he is a reverend, he is a pastor, perhaps the funeral home allowed the body to be stored maybe near the church. I don't know the answers to that. But he wouldn't even allow her family, her sisters, her father, to view the body until they signed off on the agree to have it cremated. So he was in control of all of this. And again, the decision for the autopsy, and I'll repeat this again and again and again, is not the police, it's not the family, it's the office of the chief medical examiner makes that determination. Schmitty, if autopsies are mandatory yet not performed, what ramifications would there be, and who is the recipient of the ramifications? Schmitty, Mike Geary, who besides being a retired NYPD sergeant and a professor, he has a law degree, and he was of the opinion that in a suicide or a potential suicide, that an autopsy was mandatory in every state in the United States. And apparently that's not true in North Carolina. There was no mandatory autopsy. So then who would they ask about this, whether they wanted an autopsy or not? Well, guess who? They would ask John Paul Miller. They would ask her family. They have no business making that decision. That, again, is the decision of the office of the chief medical examiner. And if he made this decision for there not to be an autopsy, it was a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake. Because where does the FBI now pick up in this investigation? Where do they go? Who do they start talking to? They can't speak to the pastor, John Paul Miller, he's got counsel. He's got an attorney. His attorney who said, don't speak to the police. So they can't talk to him. How about the people? This happened on April 27th. It's now May 14th. Who's left inside that park to talk to? Did they do a proper canvass of that location? What is the FBI going to do? I think what they're going to start to do, and I mentioned this before, is they're going to start looking at that church. They're going to start looking at John Paul Miller. They're going to start looking at their finances. They're going to start looking at everything about that church, because they may not be able to discover anything in a wrongful death case. But if there is potentially criminal charges against Reverend John Paul Miller, I would love to see it occur, but I cannot see it right now. Julia Ann, oh my God, her family didn't insist on an autopsy with the abuse. Even if family insisted on an autopsy, doesn't matter. They were not together, almost divorced. Again, we can beat this dead horse. Larlaw, who was in control of all of this at the same time he had a court-issued protection from abuse ordered against him? He should have had no rights. Well, Larlaw, I found it ridiculous that he was the person that was calling the shots in regards to her being having an autopsy, or the autopsy of the medical examiner, but on how she was going to be, the body was going to be disposed of. And that is troublesome to me, because she was in the process of divorcing this guy. Why should he have been making any decisions relative to Mica? Why? That's a question I have. And there's got to be, when we talk about the elephant in the room, there's got to be an elephant in the room somewhere, because it looks like this church, and specifically Pastor John Paul Miller, had some power within the community, had some influence within the community, because they did things seemingly that he wanted done, and not necessarily did they do things correctly. And I'm concerned with that, because from the point that he was never arrested for basically stalking his wife, abusing his wife, posting naked pictures of his wife on social media, he's never been held accountable. And that's disturbing. And showing his character, Pastor John Paul Miller, he asked a waitress to send him bikini or naked photos after leaving his phone number on a check with a large tip. This is a pastor of a church. There's a picture of the waitress on the screen. Mica Miller purchasing a gun. Again, why did she do it? Well, we that have been following this case believe that she was driven to do it by unrelenting stalking by this man you see on the right, the pastor, the stalker. He undoubtedly drove her to it. The abuse was coming in the way of verbal abuse, financial abuse, withholding her medication from her. Like, this guy used every trick in the book. And now he's trying to tell his attorney, oh, I never did a thing. He's even recorded saying he never did anything wrong against his wife. And again, Mica Miller went to the police numerous times in the months preceding her death. Mica Miller was manipulated, abused, and stalked by her husband. What happens now? Well, now they're bringing in the FBI. Is it too late? We're going to see. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. ring that bell, and share us with your friends and your family. If you want to contribute to us, we financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with, count them, 5 different levels, and you could become a YouTube channel member, join the Police Off the Cuff family. And we appreciate all our friends, our subscribers that help this podcast become what it is. Spark, so sad that he can't be charged for being a diabolical person. Yeah, Spark, unfortunately, there's no crime in the penal law that says unlawful to be a diabolical person. And I love that word, but so they have to get him with a violation or breaking the actual laws, which he did do. And for some reason, he was never arrested. The dust is wiped off of our feet. Interesting what the fisherman found in her bag, a little Bible and a bank card. Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? Chantel Debraseni, Winslow, his attorney, is an AI expert per his webpage and LinkedIn. Wow. I know a lot of people were questioning the fact that would it be possible that AI made that phone call to the 911 operator, the one we hear where she said she was going to kill herself. People are wondering if that was a possibility. Dakini Keen, I suspect her husband for blackmailing her to commit suicide, perhaps by threatening to reveal videos or pictures she would not want her children and family to see. All of those evidentiary things are present. Yeah, we all question that, and that's why we question the thoroughness and the completeness of this investigation.
From Mica's family and from police reports that John Paul was stalking and harassing Mica in the weeks leading up to her death. And today, News Nation producer Rich McHugh got a copy of a 911 call from Mica's sister after she says she received a threatening text from John Paul last November. Mica was staying with her sister at the time, and here is some of that 911 call.
911, what's the address of your emergency? I need to report a non-emergency at this point. Okay, what's going on? My sister came here today to visit because her and her husband were having issues. She came from Myrtle. She told him she'll be home on Tuesday. And he was texting me at this point saying, I'll be at your house at 12:55. I'm armed and ready, and I will keep you up all night. I'm going to get her back. Oh, and I said, you're not welcome at my house. There are no trespassing signs up. You cannot threaten weapons. He has 6 guns that he just purchased recently. And he's saying, I'm armed and ready. I'm coming to get her.
We also have 2 of the texts that John Paul sent Mica's sister that day. The first one, in the wee hours, it was sent at 1:11 a.m. And it says, John Paul has loaded, John Paul says he's loaded Mica's possessions into garbage bags and is threatening to either dump them on the sister's property or take them to the Goodwill. The second text, 7 hours later at 8:04 a.m., takes a very, very different tone. Take a look at that. It says, if she comes home today, tell her I'm sorry, so sorry. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm sorry to you and Matt. Should be known that we have repeatedly invited John Paul and his attorney to appear on this show every day that we've done the story, and they have always refused. They did give us that statement. We've now read it twice. And I want to bring in News Nation producer Allison Weiner, who's been digging into this story since the very beginning. Allison, you know, the statement yet again pointed out that the allegation that Mica suffered from mental health issues, that she was hospitalized from February 8th until February 10th. Everybody's been wondering, like, why that hospitalization, how it came about. And you were able to dig up that answer today. What is it?
Well, I got an affidavit from Mica's father, Michael, who was actually on the show the other night. And in the affidavit, he talks about the fact that John Paul was going around saying that Mica was not taking her medication and that she needed to be hospitalized. And when Micah's dad looked into it, he found out that she was really deciding to take just one pill instead of 2 pills, which is something that she was very much allowed to do. So he found at that moment and throughout a lot of their interactions that, according to him, John Paul was exaggerating a lot of things and making up things so that he could, in fact, get Mica hospitalized against her will.
So how did she end up being admitted against her will?
Well, he actually had a document. It was John Paul who admitted her, who signed the paperwork. But he showed Mica a document, and this is according to Mica's dad, but there was a document that he had shown also to Mica's father that showed that the power of attorney would be still in Mica's dad's name and also in her brother Nate's name, so that if somebody had to get her out of there, they both had the power of attorney, as well as her husband. That document was never notarized or filed, but it's something that Mica saw.
Was it a real document? Did her family actually agree with these things?
No, it was never filed. It wasn't signed by them. It wasn't notarized. So it's not a legal document, but it looked like a legal document. And basically, initially, according to Michael, to Mica's father, he was told that there was, in fact, that his son was signing the document. So it just was sort of a tangled web of lies, according to alleged by Mica's father.
Mica's father, Michael. Yeah. Okay. So the bad blood between, John Paul and Mica's family, just, bits and pieces just keep coming out. And it is so nasty. We heard the 911 call where Mica's sister talks about no trespassing signs. And then John Paul apparently did the same thing to Mica's family. Thank you for watching.
So you could see the battles going on between the family and between John Paul Miller. It doesn't sound very godlike, very preacher-like, the way this guy treated this family, and also treated his, the way he treated his wife. How does he say on one hand he never abused her, and then there's all this evidence right out front of him doing all of these different things to her, putting GPS trackers in her car, slashing her tires. Lori Turner, in an involuntary hold isn't difficult to obtain. You write a statement. The DR reviews it, and if they feel it necessary, they issue a warrant and do a temporary hold. It should be honest, but he wrote a story. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things in this case that that just don't make any sense. And I think that this guy had a lot of power over this community, and it wasn't done correctly.
Pastor at Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach and husband of Mica Miller, whose suicide has gained national attention. Thanks for joining us at 11. I'm Trish Williford. Mica's sister and her lawyer spoke with News Nation late last week. It's the first time we're hearing from the family outside of court documents. You'll recall an investigation by the Robeson County Sheriff's Office determined Miller died by suicide on April 27th at Lumber River State Park. Well, a statement from Mica's family says North Carolina authorities released her body to John Paul Miller on April 30th, 3 days after her death. It goes on to say John Paul would not allow any of Mica's family to see her body at the funeral home, then changed his mind and said he would allow it if her parents signed a certification of cremation first. Mica's sister reacted to the release of the timeline that lays out Mica's final hours.
Seeing that the PowerPoint that we received has been released and just seeing everything that's being put out, all of the research everybody that's seeing it is doing, there are a lot of unanswered questions, especially with, like we stated, all the North Carolina laws not requiring toxicologies, autopsies, and things of that nature. And then combined with John Paul stating that our parents had to sign the cremation order before we were allowed to see her, it just raises a lot of red flags for us.
But I questioned, though, why did the family sign it? Why did they allow him to be the person that was running and controlling the body? There is some I have some questions her family. It doesn't seem like they had an attorney as the voice for them. And he was running roughshod over all of them. And I question that.
We also have new video of a confrontation between Mica and John Paul at the Honda dealership in Myrtle Beach. Well, last week we told you in a Myrtle Beach police report from March 11th, Mica went to the dealership to have a tire fixed after she found a piece of metal in the tire. Well, that report also says a mechanic found a GPS tracking device in Mica's vehicle.
Walk away.
I'll show you the pictures.
Do you want to go to jail?
They'll be on Facebook in a few hours.
Alrighty, you'll be in jail in a few hours. Walk away.
We don't know what pictures John Paul is talking about in that exchange, but News Nation also reports that
apparently the pictures he was referring to was either topless or naked pictures of his wife, which he posted on Facebook. So this is a pastor. This is a pastor of a church, of the Solid Rock Church.
Email, John Paul admitted to posting a topless photo of Mica online. Well, News Nation's Rich McHugh says the email apology from JP says in part, quote, "It was up for less than 1 hour and immediately taken down. I was hurt that you are telling everyone horrible, intimate details of my past sin," end quote. Well, News Nation also reports that John Paul admitted in text messages to McHugh that he was the one who had GPS trackers put on Mica's cars and apologized for the damage caused to her vehicles. The attorney for Mica's sister claims Mica was abused.
This man, in my opinion, based on the documents, my conversations with Mica whenever she was alive, tell me that she was brainwashed by this man. He abused her in every possible way that there is. Financially, he abused her by taking away things, phones, access to money, took away her car, those types of things to try to gain control of her. Every time she tried to leave him, he would harass and stalk her to the point that she just felt like she had to give up and go back.
The attorney also clarified a claim in a Myrtle Beach police report that Mica said she was groomed by John Paul from the age of 10. She said she thinks Mica meant the year 2010, not the age of 10. Mica's sister backed that up, saying Mica always said since 14 years old, adding the family was not living in South Carolina when Mica was 10. We also reached out to the FBI about claims it was looking into John Paul and the church's mission work. Well, the agency said it is aware of public allegations, but could not confirm or deny an investigation.
So now we know that the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office have been brought into this investigation. Was the part of the investigation they're brought into, is it just the wrongful death? Is that what they're being brought into? Or are they looking at John Paul Miller and his church? Are they going to take a deeper dive and see, perhaps, because he did get away with all this stalking and withholding funds. He even appeared to make a retaliatory complaint report against Mica, saying she stole $1,200. To me, that looked like a total retaliatory complaint report, since she had made numerous complaint reports against him. And what better way to get back at someone than to make what's called a retaliatory complaint report? And I think that's what he was doing. And I want to show just a little bit, if you don't think that there's evidence of John Paul Miller being have some mental issues, let's just watch him in his church holding a memorial ceremony or honoring her life of Mica Miller. Let's watch a little bit of his preaching here.
Everyone knew how beautiful she was on the outside, but only I think a spouse knows how beautiful that person is on the inside. So I want to take a few minutes to just kind of tell some stories and just share some things about Mica that may, I don't know, shock you or help you get to know the more intimate side of her. She was beautiful on the outside. She had won so many beauty pageants, all when she was young, and I have one of her trophies here where she won Saucus the Idol. Let me tell you, just to talk about how pretty she was on the outside. When she went to one school, she won the Miss whatever the school was, beauty pageant, and then her family moved and she went to another school and she won the Miss Beauty pageant for that school too. So it was the first time in that county's history that someone won, both the pageants. But it really hadn't hit me. I've gotten to spend, as Christians, of course, we know she's not here and in heaven, and she's worshiping and enjoying, and I hadn't even had time to look down here yet. But I got this lay next to her body and spend time with her body about 4 times this week, and each time it still didn't hit me. I thought she was going to wake up. I even tried to raise her from the dead one time this week, and
that's a sane person, right? He even tried to raise her from the dead. Yeah. I keep telling yourself that. Just absolutely ridiculous. How he was allowed to run this. Also, Deanna May. Oh no, it's a funeral. I think there was one where he said that she was scared of this and that on AI. The dust is wiped off our feet. My heart breaks for the children. Pim, a true pastor would not take topless photos of his wife, and truly he would not show them to anyone. He's a disgusting hypocrite, an evil person and master manipulator. He's a pathological liar. I agree. Sherry Murray, he's the one with mental disorder that added to hers while she was a teenager. I'm serious with this one. Oh my God. Audrey Dulesky, he gross guy. He is so gross. Deanna May, is that a bruise on JP's right hand, the top of his hand? I can't tell from this video, this angle. Alyssa, baseball, softball mom. They said he hooked up with her when she was 14, right? Well, she started to babysit for his children when she was 14. There's no allegations. I mean, there's people talking, but there was no complaint report or no allegation that he was having an proper relationship with her when she was 14. Mary Quarles, why did he get to see her body and not her family? Well, he obviously got control of her body when it was released by the medical examiner to a funeral home, and then it was cremated. Debbie Grigg, why didn't she leave a note asking not to contact him, only her family when they found her? Because she was in distress. She was in so much distress that she was suicidal. She didn't think of everything.
That morning, actually, I went to the mall later. She had bought me this dog tag, and the chain broke, so I went to the mall to get it fixed. And I saw a female about 20, 30 feet in front of me, and she was wearing one of Mica's dresses. And she had the same tattoo Mica has on her arm and the exact same hair. And out of just instinct, I screamed, "Mica!" And the girl turned around, and it was one of her sisters. And I thought I raised her from the dead. She's alive, But I can't wait to see her again one day. I'm good. So I have pictures, and I want to just tell you some stuff about her. When we fell in love, and we started dating, and it was time to get engaged, she loved public displays of affection. Like, she loved that. She always wanted me to, hug her in public and stuff like that. And I'm more of a private person. But I thought, okay, we're going to get engaged. I'm going to make it
privately.
I'm going to make it everything she wanted. So I set up a church baptism out on the beach so that everybody in church could be there, for us to get engaged and be a part of that. And then I had this plane that was going to fly by and have "Will you marry me?" Mica, there, and she's going to love that. And so everybody's kind of waiting. The baptism's over, and we're out there playing volleyball. And all of a sudden, the plane comes by, and I take Mica and I turn her around and I face her toward the ocean, face her toward the plane, and everybody's clapping and cheering. And she leaned back. She said, "Why is everybody cheering?" I said, the plane. And she said, "Oh, I don't have my contacts in." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm playing this whole thing." I got a picture of that, I think, yeah, there. And I never forget, her exact words were, she said, she turned around, "There's the plane up there." She couldn't see it till we took a picture later. Her exact words, I'll never forget, she said, "Well, yes, anyways, yes." And she had a hoarse voice that day from singing. And But she was always excited about stuff, always so excited. I'm sorry if I'm just rambling, but I'll do my best. She loved Solid Rock. She served this place for over a decade. Her time with Reverend Randall, I think is there a picture of her and Reverend Randall somewhere there? And Reverend Randall never gets his picture taken. So when she got this, she was so excited. She sent it to me. Said, "I got Reverend Randall's picture," and we had it blown up, and it's down here. She loved that. She was the worship leader, and she was bold and confident and anointed and passionate. And the very first time I worked with her on that, I said, "Okay, I'd like you to try to lead a song, and I'll help you." And I told her what I wanted her to do. About 3 minutes later, she's like, "No, you're doing it wrong. I'm going to tell you how we're going to do it." And she said, "You missed this note. You need to fix this." She did. I thought, "Oh, my goodness." And she was the graphic designer. I think it's a picture of some of the stuff she designed. Yep. She designed every logo we got, every book, everything we ever did. And she loved doing this stuff. And she would do it with such integrity to the T. Like, I would say, "Okay, it's good. We're done." She said, "Nope, it can be better." I said, "No, it can't be any better." And she'd fix the slightest, smallest thing and spend 6, 8, 10 hours doing that. She was in charge of women's ministry, youth ministry. She loved that. She was the go-to person around here if anything was kind of messed up or needed to be fixed or needed to be created. That was the thing she did. We spent almost every night just talking and chilling out. We didn't watch much TV. She would make me turn my cell phone off, and so I turned the cell phone off, and we would talk for hours and hours about. Well, let me rephrase it. She would talk for hours and hours and hours. And sometimes I would kind of not listen. I thought, "Oh no, is she going to ask me a question?" I'd get back in my mind to what we're talking about. And she would change subjects. She'd go from one thing to the next. And
Yeah, this is very very tough to watch and to listen to, but I think it shows you who this guy is, and it shows you that all of the allegations made against him are absolutely 100% true. And he was torturing his poor wife. Sherry Murray from the chat, watching this, Sarge, literally made me sick to my stomach what she went through. Keep on talking, JP. Keep digging your own grave. All coming out. I agree. Mary Elizabeth Butler, I pray for the people sitting in this church listening to this fool. Mary Elizabeth, you're 100% right. Who would listen to this guy? The dust is wiped off our feet from the chat. Thankful for so many that help others like you not be deceived and lied to just because someone uses God, Jesus. Yes. Barbara RN54, he's repulsive. Absolutely. Sherry Lowe, leave chat and hit the like button. Yeah, I mean, he is despicable. Let me just play a little bit more and then we'll move on from this guy.
Things with her, and I said, "I have children. I can't do this kind of stuff. What if something happens to me?" And so I said, "I'll do indoor skydiving." Right. So we took the boys, and we didn't. But even I decided not even to do that either. I said, "I'm going to stay on the ground." But we did that many times. So this is the day she decided to jump out of a plane for the first time. She did it several times, but this first time, my stomach was in knots. I was in the bathroom. I'm texting her, "Please don't do it. I don't think you should jump out of the plane. This is not something that humans should do." Here she is, how excited she is. "I'm about to jump out of a plane. I'm drinking a coffee." And that was pretty much her life story right there. She was so excited, man. She jumped out of a plane many times. What's the next picture we got? Oh, there's the boys are so funny on our vacations. What's the next one? She was all big into tattoos, and I cannot stand tattoos because they hurt and I don't like pain. And the first time we went, she had gotten the 2 crosses, and she begged and begged and begged for me to get the matching tattoo. So we went to the tattoo guy, and I said, "Listen, I don't like pain." I said, "Can we start with the smaller one? That way, if it hurts too bad, we can just stop there." And I discovered that while I was doing this and not looking, she was telling the guy, "Start with the big one." And so we started with the big one. I was like, "Oh my goodness." And then after that, I discovered this numbing cream you can buy online where you can put on you and you don't feel the tattoo. So after that, I said, "Okay, I'll do whatever you want." And so we had our marriage vows. And there was the next one after that. Oh, so Africa. You know what? Before I talk about that, I want to tell you something else. So she was the greatest gift giver. All my life, I never enjoyed birthdays or Christmases. I thought it was a waste of money, waste of time because someone gets you something, thank you, and you don't. But she was so thoughtful with her gifts that when we got married, I would look forward every birthday and every Christmas, just waiting to see what she came up with. And amazing gifts, amazing.
I know, guys, it's tough to take, and we'll move on from him. Basically, if this does anything, it just shows you what a fraud and a con man he is. Watching him preach and him pretending he's the all caring, all loving pastor when the reverse comes out there. So just to recap today, the big news, of course, is that the sheriff of Robeson County has asked the FBI and not the state attorney general's office, according to the article by Newsweek, but the U.S. attorney's office to get involved in the Mica Miller death investigation. Now, no doubt if they do get involved in this, it's going to spread to looking at Pastor Miller here and his church and their finances and everything that can potentially get uncovered in this. When the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office involved, they use words that they're looking at like fraud. You think this guy's a fraud? They'll look at potential irregularities with their finances. I was going to say tax evasion, but churches don't pay any taxes. And that, to me, that's sort of ridiculous. It just allows for so much criminality when they don't have to pay taxes. And the rest of us pay 3 times as much because churches and other religious facilities don't pay taxes. Just unbelievable. So I want to go back to the chat, and Sharon Reynolds, false crying, another cult sexual predator. Jane Darby, he said he takes 900 milligrams of lithium. Well, that's pretty crazy. Scrutiny Channel, he's laughing, talking so fast, he's dangerous. M.A. Sunshine, if his lips are moving, he's lying. Yeah, I think you're right. Miss Crime Buster, so he can plan a sermon, but he can't plan his speech for his wife's funeral. He's all over the place. Yes, he sure is. Stan Fenn, bet his next victim is sitting in the audience waiting her turn. Yeah, I mean, as we said, I don't know who would sit in this audience and listen to this guy. Deanna May, I was going to say that what you thought was dirt on his right hand apparently is a tattoo. So we've cleared that up. Terry Jones, JP looks like a hobbit. Vissy J, it's almost like he's trying to do a comedy gig. Yeah, he's quite a character. I don't find him funny at all. Ashley Nash, does not shock me that he can't handle a tattoo, for crying out loud. Scrutiny Channel, he sounds manic. Melissa M. from the chat, irony, the coward who's afraid of pain inflicted tremendous pain on the women who loved him. What a coward. Wow. I think you're right. The dust is wiped off our feet. It's all about self. Meyer R. So true. He starts to speak about her, but the story is really about himself. He is pathetic. I agree. Absolutely agree. So, folks, I wanted to cover this today and find out, there's new things breaking on this case. There's new investigations going on. The FBI and the U.S. Attorney General will be looking into this case. I know many people are unsatisfied with the investigation, as I think many should be, because many things are hidden, many things were done behind closed doors, and I think that that's not right in a case like this. You have to be transparent, and we want to find out all we can about this guy, Pastor John Paul Miller, and his previous transgressions. So, folks, thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Have a great day, everyone, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.